Hey guys, Kenny here from Learn How to Prosper, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the purpose hypothesis. And uh, I've got a series that I'm going to be doing over the next year where I'm going to talk about elements of this. And if you haven't seen the purpose hypothesis, then you can click in the link that will be in the description box of this video. And you'll be able to see it is a little bit over an hour, the presentation, but in essence I discuss the purpose of life and then how your individual personal mission snaps into that. But one of the things I want to talk about today, because the purpose hypothesis, it talks about you, who you are, who you truly are. And so today I want to talk about this idea of borrowed names, which in essence we all do it. We all have these labels and ways that we define ourselves, and I think it's potentially pretty normal for that to happen. And I've felt this in my life a couple of different ways, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. But there's real danger in anchoring to these types of labels because they change. Whereas your identity, and as um, an eternal being, that doesn't change. In fact, that kind of perspective really dictates a whole different way of looking at yourself, at your circumstances. And when you have that kind of perspective, it allows you to pretty much work through almost anything. And so I want to talk about that a little bit today. The core thesis here is that our true identity transcends external labels, achievements, and societal roles. And it is true. Understanding this core self is fundamental living authentically. Um, your labels are borrowed, and your identity is eternal. And I really build upon this in the full purpose hypothesis, which, in a nutshell, is my strong conviction and belief, and my hypothesis, having tested this now for 6 decades, is that we lived as beings before we came here. We developed personalities and skill and certain attributes and skills and and certain ways of being, and those things are now reflected in our personality and who we are when we're born here upon this earth. And then, of course, we'll take the things that we learn in this life and we'll take it with us when we go. And this earth life is merely one step along the way. And I think that for me, being able to anchor to something that is timeless and real allows me to shrug off a lot of the things that I think could really otherwise drag me down. And maybe it's dragging you down. So that's one of the things that I would really I recommend to you, is taking some time and really thinking through, your own individual purpose. And in that, and this is I guess the thing I really want to emphasize today, is that you do have an individual and personalized mission, a thing that you're to accomplish in this life, where you can apply those unique abilities and skills, your personality, your essence, your soul, and you can bring those forward and make powerful impacts in the world. And I think once you come to understand that, you really can't be the same anymore. So here are some of the key questions. What remains when all external identifiers are removed? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, think about this. I mean, I've seen it now because, and especially my wife and I, we have 4 daughters. And at some point, our daughters, they grow up. And at this point, they've all moved away. Certainly, we're still a mother and a father, and we appreciate and honor those roles, but it's not the same as it was. And so it was a little bit of a transition for both of us, more particularly for my wife, to make that transition from being a mother and spending her daily energy and efforts in that, to now uh, that's shifted. And I know for me, and so maybe this has happened to you, you have a particular job. I know for a long time, for a period of time, I was a mental health counselor, and then I completely shifted over into high tech. And it was a massive identity crisis for a while because I had to kind of completely reformulate the way that I saw myself. And it's kind of interesting because at some point, if you can see yourself as a type of person, uh, at some point it's pretty hard to avoid becoming that person. So, for example, um, if you say, "Well, I'm just a broken, baroque person," then it's very hard to get away from that and recognize that you're not that broken person. What if you saw yourself as truly an eternal being having this kind of temporal experience, this mortal experience? What if you saw yourself as actually a divine being that has immense power and immense ability, and that you came here for the opportunity to learn and grow and develop? And if you saw yourself as that kind of like truly a powerful divine being, then when things come along that are difficult, you can just say, well, that's just a part of, it's just a part of my growth journey. It's not a reflection on me being broken or weak. It's just a reflection on me being on the journey and part way along the path. How do we connect with the unchanging essence of who we are? Well, I think ultimately, uh, we have to, well, my hypothesis here is that we recognize that we are a divine being, an actual being, a child of God, God being our Father. And as such, if you can think of yourself truly in that divine role, then no matter what comes along, you can connect to that. And no matter what difficulties present themselves, you're prepared and you have something to anchor to. And I'm not saying to do this from the perspective of some religious tradition. I'm really imploring you to just take some time and think about um, the many times in your life you've thought, well, there's got to be something bigger, there's something more. Because if you are a divine being, and if there truly is a God who is our Father, then He's going to leave clues, and He's going to leave mechanisms, and He's going to leave ways for you to come to know that. And if I can be a help to you on that journey, I hope that I could be, then I would very much invite you to reach out. You can do that through the learnhowtoprosper.com website. I wanted to just a couple of different ideas here. I can think of, I'm approaching the end of my work life, and I'm already starting to, I see how that shift into the next phase. I'm having to start to see myself as someone different in that way, and I can see where it can be a little bit challenging. It certainly was when we had grandchildren, and I could start to see myself now. I'm a grandparent. Um, there are a number of different times in my life when I've had uh, labels that I use to define myself, and inevitably things change and times change, and that's where over time I've been able to anchor to something that is more solid and rigid and lasting. And I can just tell you that it brings an enormous amount of peace, an enormous amount of grounding, rather than just constantly, I guess, searching and never finding. So the practical takeaway, just a few ideas today, is start to practice this label shedding exercise. Rather than labeling yourself or thinking of yourself as a particular label, I want you to think about who you truly are in terms of your soul and your essence. You can write about that. I want you to take some time. I would say if you've never prayed or had a conversation with heaven, I invite you to do that. You don't need anything special. You can just talk just the way you normally talk. And sometimes it might take 5 or 10 minutes, but if you do that, you're going to see that in time, the feeling in the room, the feeling in your heart will change, and you will be touched in special ways that really I couldn't explain. You can only experience by doing it yourself. So identify core values or qualities that define you regardless of external factors. Well, one quality is you're a divine being, okay? And no one can take that away from you. You're here having this mortal experience, and you're going to make mistakes, have challenges. All those things are just a part of the experience. I know these things for many people feel very natural. For you, if it doesn't, I just invite you to consider it. And I hope that you'll stay around for my series here, of which I'll have several videos coming up in the weeks and months that come. And so with that, I hope that you'll join me over at learnhowtoprosper.com. And I've got a section under faith. I cover health, wealth, relationships, and faith. And this is my series under that topic. And I hope to see you over there. Also, there's an exercise and a tool that can help you start to define your own individual purpose and mission. And I invite you to participate in that. With that, I'm going to sign off, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.